Fisherman's Post. More fish, more often.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series. I'm Gary Hurley of Fisherman's Post. Fisherman's Post has been serving the saltwater fishing community of North Carolina since 2003, bringing you fishing reports, fishing information, fishing tournaments, fishing schools, and now, in our most recent venture, this Saltwater Podcast Series. And in this Saltwater Podcast Series, what we do is we reach out to our captain and guide friends from up and down the North Carolina coast, asking them to share their insights, their knowledge with our viewers, with our listeners, with the hopes that you end up catching more fish more often. But truthfully told, it's not just about more fish more often. I think another one of our goals is just to give you more confidence, get you focused, more confidence to get out on the water, because what you spend more time with more family, more friends on the water, not just more fish. I'm joined, as I am every week, by Billy Thorpe of Thorpe Creative.
What's going on, Gary?
Hello again,
Good
Billy.
to see you, man.
Hey, let me tell you about this episode.
All right, let's go.
We're going to talk shallow water redfish, and we're going to talk about light tackle and fly. I know you have you have a soft spot in your heart for fly.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking to a relatively new guide to the scene, young, and he's doing great stuff up in Topsail. I'm talking about Captain Ethan Bilderback, and that's Steller Angler Guide Service out of Topsail. And so we're going to talk about, among other things, searching for fish, and then we're going to talk about stalking fish. We're going to talk about hunting fish.
I'm stoked, man. That fly fishing gets me going.
Yeah, I know it would, man. I knew you'd be
good.
excited about this episode, and I think he's going to be sharing
Thanks for
lots of good
booking the show
information.
for me, Gary.
I did this
Looking
for you.
out for me, man.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. That's a happy Halloween or something.
Have
Well, that passed already.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, I'm going to tell you how to watch, how to listen. If you're doing one or the other, then you probably know. But here is a list of places you can find our podcast: Spotify, Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Google Play Music. And also, I could have added on there, but Amazon. We're now on Amazon podcasts as well. So Amazon's in the game of everything, Gary. So, yeah, man. But everybody's making it possible. I mean, not everybody. I don't know why I said everybody. Marine Warehouse is making it possible, which we really appreciate those guys. Yeah, absolutely. And as always, the marketing person's my favorite. Just another shout out to Lil, just so she knows she's loved, you know?
We want her to feel loved.
Yeah.
You know, I talk about the owners, I talk about Emmett, I talk about Terrell, but we want to get Lil her plug, but really from top to bottom. And they got a great crew there, you know, whether it's answering the phones, doing the books, or working on the engines in the back.
And they got a great video. I'm going to show it to you right now.
Please.
As you know, it's been a great year for boat sales. However, it's been really tough for customers to find boats in stock. We're the headquarters in Wilmington, North Carolina for Para Customs, Sailfish, Sea Chaser, and Carolina Skiff. Our manufacturers are telling us the high demand for boats is going to affect 2021 inventory as well. So if you're looking to get a boat in the spring, you need to come sign up with us now.
Excellent. I think that was Emmett playing the banjo in that song.
It might be. It might be. You know, I've been spending a fair amount of time with Terrell.
How did I see this coming?
I think too much time. That guy's calling me all the time. I can't keep doing it. I mean, I don't know what he does. I don't know why he has so much free time, but I'm going to have to cool. I'm feeling like I might have to cool my relationship. However, I am having a good time, and he's quite a host. Most recently, man, he was making us Shirley Temples, and we didn't even need a snack. He was loading them up with maraschino cherries. Man, that guy is ridiculous. Like, he told me a fish joke.
I'm excited to hear it. I'm stoked.
I'm not sure you are, but I'm going to tell you anyway.
All right.
So this is Terrell's joke. Again, these are not my jokes. There was a massive fight today at the seafood restaurant, Terrell told me. A fish got battered.
Okay, that's a good one.
Really? Really?
I mean, it's funny. Like, whatever. Maybe I'm just an easy crowd here. I don't know.
Oh, Terrell. Ugh.
Terrell should quit that job over there at Marine Warehouse, sell his part of it, and go do stand-up.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, just go do stand-up. He's good. It's great. Those 4 or 5 jokes you shared so far definitely get somebody going.
Billy, this is when I say save me, and show us a fish photo.
All right, let's see if I can find a fish photo here. All right, here we go. Jennifer and Joe Bryan of Wilmington, North Carolina, with a red drum caught on live mullet while fishing out of Morehead City. Good looking drum.
Good looking shirt on that dude.
A better looking shirt. Yeah, I didn't even see that. That's funny. I wonder if that had anything to do with him being featured on this episode.
You mean the SPF shirts that are available online? No.
Fisherman'sPost.com, 1999 or whatever. Oh man,
no, good fit. He's a fan. He's a fan of the fishing schools. He's a fan of the podcast. He sent in that photo, and we're happy to give him a moment. We're happy to.
Absolutely.
And so before I transition and introduce Ethan, we get to meet Ethan. A reminder about Billy's best takeaway. At the end of this episode, at the end of this podcast, I'm coming to you, and I'm going to ask you, Billy, of everything that Ethan shared with us, what is your best takeaway?
Yeah, arguably the most important segment of the entire show.
Arguably. Because you can argue anything.
Because I can argue. Yeah, right.
All right. Now I transition. I'm going to introduce to you Captain Ethan Bilderback of Steller Angler Guide Service out of the Topsail area. Welcome to the show, Ethan. A pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, man, looking forward to this. I mean, I know people love redfish and shallow water redfish. It's been a direction I've been going in. I mean, I love watching that fish run around and not just go deep and then, come up by the boat. So I'm already a fan. When we're talking light tackle and fly, that's another angle. So I love the concept, shallow water redfish, light tackle and fly, talking about searching for fish, talking about stalking fish. However, before we get to the main event, before we hear what you have to say about shallow water redfish, my audience wants to know. You've got two questions for you. The first question, very predictable. Why should people continue to watch, continue to listen? Why should they care what you have to say about a redfish?
I fish for these fish every single day. I target these fish on light tackle, artificial. And it's one of those fish that I have begun to love. I started fishing for them here when I first got to North Carolina. My first one was 28 inches, and after that, I was hooked. This is what I'm known for. This is what I'm really good at. And that's pretty much it. It pretty much sums it up.
That passes. That's a passable answer. We will continue with the podcast, Ethan. So now the second question is a non-fishing related question. I got to say, I didn't have much luck looking up a question that related to Steller. The closest I could get was Stella. So I got basically two questions because you are younger than me. So the first question has to do with Stella. Do you know what movie or what actor yelled the word Stella out loud, and what movie or what actor did? Famous movie, famous actor.
Famous movie, favorite actor. Is it an old movie?
Yes.
Stella.
Marlon Brando. Stella. A Streetcar Named Desire. All right, but I got another Stella question because I knew that was dated. I knew I was talking to a younger captain that was questioning. Here's my second Stella question, all right? The beer. The beer, Stella Artois, is a beer from what country?
Stella is from... Actually, I couldn't even tell you.
I couldn't either unless I Googled it yesterday, which I did, and it's Belgium. So don't.
It's Belgium?
It's Belgium.
Well, thank you for that new knowledge.
How about that, man? It's a favor from me to you. Now, your turn on the knowledge. Let's talk. So, again, what we've set up is a little bit of a guide here talking about searching for redfish in shallow water first, and then where we're not seeing them, we're looking for the fish, and then after that, I believe what you're going to do is transition into more stalking, hunting fish once we've located them. So let's start the conversation with searching for fish in shallow water. So I guess maybe first just tell me about the kind of environment we're talking about where these redfish would be in shallow water.
Okay, so when I'm targeting these fish, or I'm trying to find these fish, it kind of depends on the time of the year. Summertime, I'm fishing bigger bays where there's a bunch of feeder creeks coming into bays. And then wintertime, I'm finding these fish like in creeks, deeper creeks. But when I am out on the flats trying to find these fish, I'm throwing topwater plugs at a falling tide or a rising tide around areas where there is water coming in and out. And what these fish will do is they will, at the lowest tide, they'll come off the bank. But as the tide rises, that bait is trying to get up to those banks, into those little feeder creeks, and those redfish are trying to push up there and eat that bait. They're trying to get right on that shoreline there. So what I'm doing at different times, I utilize topwater plugs a lot in the shallow water. Most people say that you can't throw topwater all day, but if you're in a foot of water and that fish is floating, right there under that lure, that fish is looking at that lure going by, and they're going to hear that click, 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 and pop on that. Midsummer when it gets real hot outside, those fish are a little bit slower. You kind of have to get them, right off the bat or put it right in front of them. Because our water temps here do get really warm during the summer. But I'm kind of veering off this question. But I am looking for those bays where those creeks funnel in and out of water. Current flow is good. Edges of islands where, these fish could get behind and ambush bait as it flows in and out. Those fish are going to be all in there. And you're looking for shrimp busting, mullet. Those fish will show themselves on the banks at lower tides.
So when you're talking about shallow water, what's your vision there? Like 1 to 3 feet, 1 to 4 feet? What would be your definition of shallow water red fishing?
Shallow water is anywhere between 6 inches and 18 inches for me. That's the depth that I like to target them in. A lot of them will be at that depth, and pushing the boat that I run is the HPX tunnel haul. So that boat allows me to get very shallow, and the shallowest I can get is where I'll find those fish. I'll even find those fish crawling with their eyes out of the water, back out of the water, and they're up there trying to find food. So anything in that real shallow range, and I will fish bays that go from 1 to 3 feet too, but my favorite area to find them is in that really shallow water.
And so did I hear you in the answer to the first question, you like, as long as tide is moving, it doesn't matter to you whether it's incoming or outcoming, but you like some movement? I
do like tidal movement. I like to fish a rising. So on a falling tide, you can get out in those flats and fish around those creeks that are funneling into bays, and all that bait's coming out of those creeks and entering that bay, and those fish should be right on that, right on those points as this bait comes out. And then on a rising tide, I like to take a lot of my fly guys on rising tides from pretty much dead low to a rise. We got fresh water coming in, clean water coming in. And then all those fish start to push up and get further and further towards those shorelines. And that's where they'll be. So I like current flow. I never find fish where there's stagnant water or water not really moving. Wherever there's that tidal change, you find fish.
Well, let's talk about, I know you do spinning and fly. Let's focus on the spin part first. So if I'm coming in with you, you're coming into a bay, pretty big, broad area, shallow water. Like, how do you scout out your search process? Like, so what are you doing first? What are you looking for? And then how are you applying, that technique?
So if I'm pre-fishing before my clients step on the boat, I'm going out there, and I use Google Maps a lot wherever I'm seeing big bays where, there's structure, oyster beds, little creeks. I'm going to go in there through these summer months and throw topwater plugs and see if they're in there. Early in the morning, you will get a strike on a topwater. Redfish really love that topwater plug, and most of my clients, I put topwaters in their hands first thing. We don't really throw anything else early in the morning. It's strictly topwater. Midsummer, we're usually done by 8 or 9 o'clock. And then through these fall months, when that water temp is in that 70 range, low 70, high 60. Those fish are active all day, especially over mud flats. They'll get up on there, and those fish are happy. They're up there sunbathing. They're ready to eat. They see that top water come by and a foot of water, and they're just ready to pounce on it.
And you're focusing on like that early morning when you put a topwater in my hand. What's the instruction? Like cast towards the shoreline, cast towards points? Like where are we?
Yep. Say we're going along a bay and there's multiple points that come out. And I'm on the poling platform poling you. If there's a feeder creek, we're going to hit the right side, left side of that creek. Most of the time, there's usually a fish sitting right in the middle of that creek. And as that bait's coming in and out, there's going to be a fish there. If we're coming around a point, we're going to fish past the point and then bring it back towards the point, towards the bow of the boat, and try to get a fish to pounce on in an ambush area. Wherever there's points, you want to cast around them. And then a lot of the time you'll see bait getting nervous. You'll see bait on top, bait swimming real fast, bait jumping, fish hitting bait. If there's fish hitting bait, we're casting right in there. We may stop for a second. It may hold you in that spot and let you cast a few times. And then when we're casting that topwater plug, we're working in 10-yard increments. Those fish can hear that plug 10 yards away. So wherever you're casting, I never want my clients to cast in the same spot over again. Unless we're sitting on a pile of fish. If we're working an area, that topwater plug is moving 10 yards at a time up the bank. And that's pretty much how we work it.
Is the ideal angle like cast to the bank and then pull it back to the boat? Or are you trying to position
we
the
wanna
boat
work,
so I'm casting down the shoreline?
We want to work right at that bank. So if I have you and, our 9 o'clock is the bank here, then we're going to cast directly across and then up to our 12. So in between 9 and 12, the bow is the 12, 9's directly across from the boat. We're working that angle. We're never working behind the boat. We're always working, 9 and above.
And so that's searching for fish. Now, I'm just going to imagine that a fair amount of our audience, focuses more effort at fishing in the summertime. And so if it is the summer months and it's after 8, 9 o'clock, then what are you putting in my hand to sort of search for fish?
We utilize gold spoons a lot. Gold spoons work really well. And then I like to use jerk shads as well. And, I go out there and I find the fish, and if there's a school sitting in an area, we'll pull up on them, put the power pole down, and then we'll work some jerk shads in there. If they don't like that, try gold spoon, something a little flashier. And if they don't like that, then the old popping cork works pretty good. If we're having a slow day, pulling out one of those popping corks rigged up with a gulp shrimp under it usually does the job. And especially when you're going through big bays. If you have to go out there and cover a bunch of water, utilizing that popping cork is great. It's calling those fish in. It's loud. There's something stinky on the bottom of it. And those fish will eat that. So on my tougher days, it's something that I really like to use.
So what about the 10-yard rule that's not making as much noise as a topwater clacking around? Is it you still sort of have the same kind of fan cast 10-yard approach?
Yeah. You never want to work in the same spot over and over again unless you know that there's fish sitting there. And then through the summer months, with those popping corks, you can work those. You can do the same thing with a topwater with that. You can throw that 10 yards at a time. It's loud. It's clicking. But gold spoon wise, yeah, everything I never like to cast in the same spot. Kind of keep working. You got to keep working around. As long as, there's not fish holding in one particular spot, then we're pulling down a flat and you're fan casting all the way up and down that bank. Never in the same spot there.
So I'm thinking we're still talking about searching for fish. So now if I am a fly client on your boat, how does searching for redfish when we haven't seen any yet, how does that change?
Searching wise, I'll usually find those fish. I'll know where they get staged up. They will be in an area that I've pre-fished before. And then when we're working with fly clients, our approach is stealthy. We're in there, we're hunting for those fish. We're very quiet. We're moving at a slow pace. I'm on the polling platform. I have you elevated on the bow, and we are searching and looking for those fish. And at that time, I like to fish low tides. A low incoming tide is usually always good. It brings in that cleaner water. Fresh water is good. We can see a little bit better in it. When you get to the bottom of a falling tide, it usually gets muddy or murky. So on that rising tide, we're in there, we're pulling around, we're going right up the banks. We're hugging as close as we can to those banks. Those fish will be up on them. And I'm just pulling you very slow. And as we approach that fish, we're taking shots. A lot of those shots are within 10 to 15 yards, maybe even closer, depending on the day and the wind. But a lot of that is just you're seeing that fish, we're getting on top of them, and you're taking your shots.
So I'm not blind cast. If I'm fly fishing with you, I'm not doing too much blind casting. We're basically going to move around until we have visual confirmation.
Yes, and we'll do that also with light tackle too. For all my light tackle guys that like to sight cast as well, I put on a jerk shad, and we're not blind casting at all. If we're out there and our goal is to sight cast fish, then we're going to go out there, we're going to see that fish and pitch that bait to that fish or fly to that fish.
So polling has got to be an improvement over the trolling motor, but most of my guys are not going to have a friend to pull them, or my guy's not going to pull their friend. Is the trolling motor a deal breaker?
It's not a deal breaker. When you're in a little deeper stuff, the stuff that I like to target is shallow. And they can hear that trolling motor coming in and buzzing. But again, that's for me and my clients or my guests that step on the boat that want to see that fish, make a cast at that fish, and catch that fish. If you don't have access to a polling platform or someone to pull you, or even a flats boat, you can work those trolling motors and do the same thing that we were talking about with our top water, with our spoons, and going through those bays or creeks. But a thing that I read this a long time ago. I think it was in Florida Sportsman, and it said whenever you're working in shallow water, that's that 1 to 3 foot range, you don't want to keep changing your trolling motor speed. The more you change your speed, the quicker the fish will catch on to it or realize something's up. But if you keep it at a steady pace, then you're less likely to spook fish.
I follow that. I guess it just becomes background noise if it's monotonous and steady, and it's the change that would key them in.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I wasn't crazy about Florida Sportsman being mentioned on my podcast, but
I'm sorry. It's just
but I'm kidding. I mean, I'm kidding. Florida, that was a good tip. All right. So I know we're talking about stalking next. We've already kind of touched on it a little bit, but what I like to do is just say, hey man, what have anything else on searching for redfish that you'd like to share with everyone that I didn't really set you up with a question to tell everyone?
No, I think that's pretty good, man. Unless if you think we need more, then we can talk about it a little bit more. But I kind of touched on it pretty good, I feel.
Okay, man. So let's go to stalking fish, because I like how you decided to set this show up. I like we're going to talk about search, and then we're going to talk about stalking. So now, I guess I'm just going to cut it loose to you, man. You've got it. I think we talk about spinning first and then fly second, just like we did in the first segment. Talk to me. Give me your thoughts about stalking redfish when you got a spinning client on the boat.
When we're out there stalking, it's pretty similar to fly. We're out there. We're working really slow through shallow water. We are working through bays that have clean water. Over sand is typically good. There are some muddy bottom flats that are good too. But when we move into those flats, we're working slow right up the bank. We're working as slow as we can. And on that rising tide, that's why I really like to fish a rising tide. Because if you can get that tide behind you and you slide into a bay, and you have that tide coming in behind you, you can basically float through that whole flat without making too much disturbance in the water. As soon as the push-pull hits a oyster rock, it's going to cause a little bit of commotion, or kind of give away that you are in that bay. Or if your trolling motor is going and you hit an oyster rock, or you hit something, that sound is going to travel through shallow water.
So is noise an absolute deal breaker? I mean, I'm guessing you want as stealth as possible, but if we make some inadvertent noise, should we might as well move on, like jigs up?
No, you don't have to. If something happens, like somebody closes a hatch real loud, because it has happened on my boat. We'll be in shallow water and somebody needs a drink, open the hatch and slam it, and we're sitting in a foot of water, and for a minute I just sit there. I'll just sit, let everything resettle, and then move on. And keep working. It's not going to be an absolute deal breaker. A lot of those fish that are going to be in those areas are staged up in those areas for a reason. There's bait in there. They're happy in there. They feel comfortable in there, and they're protected. So it's not an absolute deal breaker, but just slow back down, reset, get a drink of water, eat something real quick, and then, get back to it.
When you spot these red drum, you're stalking them, you spot them, are they on the move, or are they just holding fast to some spot?
A lot of them are just floating through the shallows. They're waiting for bait to come in and out. They're happy in there. They'll just be floating in there. A lot of them sit on the banks and sunbathe, especially through these fall months. You'll see a lot of them sitting on the sunny side banks, and they're just sitting there warming up. They're not doing too much. If they're hungry, you're going to see them eat, at that water depth, or wake. You'll see them waking across, and then from there, you just make your cast at them.
All right, so I got a couple of follow-up questions. If we're working down the bank and we spot a redfish holding on the sunny side or holding on a point, and that fish is roughly, straight up ahead on the bank that we're moving down slowly, how are you going to position the boat? How are you instructing me to cast when that fish is, at 12 o'clock up ahead on the same bank we're working down?
So we're going to get in a good distance to make the shot. I don't want to have you make a far shot and miss 3 or 4 times. I want you to be precise with your cast and, hit them the first or second cast. So I'm going to get you, within 10 to 15 yards of that fish. If we can slide on them even closer, then we will. And then what we're going to do, we're going to be pretty aggressive with our shots. We're using Z-Mans that don't slap real hard when they hit the water. They're not real heavy baits. We're using a weedless 1/8 ounce weedless rig with a soft plastic on the back of it, or a very light fly. And what we're going to do, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to put it in front of him, or pass. So if the fish is in front of us, what I always tell my clients to do is cast past them, and then you want to reel it up to him. And then as soon as that fish sees it, they're going to turn on it and eat it. More than most likely. But there are some days where it's a little bit tougher. But we want to come across his face. We don't want to put it on his back and reel it up to him. And then if you cast on top of him or past him and your line's on the back of him, he hasn't spooked, it's just gonna let it sit for a second. Keep your rod tip high. We don't want that line to touch him. Let him move a little bit. Reel your line up, and then we're going to take another shot at him. But we want to be in front of him and bring it across his face, or in the direction that he's feeding. But we're not going to be very abrupt with any of our twitches, any of our strips, any of our jerks. It's just very subtle. It's just a light tap, just to show the presence that there is bait around, and most likely they will get on it.
Okay, so that was where I was going with my question. Like, if I'm bringing it across its face, a little bit off, am I making sure I maintain a steady retrieve, a steady movement, or will I just let it sit in front of him for a while?
You'll just let it sit until he sees it. And those Z-Mans are great too because they are scented. So usually they get a little whiff of it and they're like, oh, okay, that smells good. I'm going to chase that. And then he's going to bring it right by him. And with my fly clients, I always tell my fly clients, be pretty aggressive. We're going to take those shots. And if you land in front of him and he's working that direction, we may just let that lure or that fly sit there until he gets close enough to start working our baits. But I never be real forceful with them. Don't land on them. Try not to land on them. It happens. It happens to everybody. And that's kind of the approach right there.
So let me go to a couple of gear questions. First on spinning, man. You talked about Z-Man. You talked about 1/8, and what we're hooking it to. What about fluoro? What about leader? How long and what length and what size?
Summertime, I'm using fluoro. That's 20 pound, and it's about like 18 inches long. And that's pretty good. And then, when our water gets real clear here in the fall, starting now until, March, we're going to see some very clean water. I may even go down to 10, 12, 15, depending on the water clarity and how spooky those fish are. Because in that clean water, once we start to see our schools, if one fish catches on, it could spook up the whole school. So you really want to be able to approach those fish and know how to disguise your bait to make it look like it's real, without alerting all the other fish that are swimming with them.
Your spinning setups, 2,500, 3,000. What do you like there?
Yeah, I like to throw a 3,000. I fish tsunamis. I fish the shields. They're great. They're completely sealed. No salt water can get in them. They're perfect for an everyday fisherman.
Spooled with braid?
Spooled with braid. Spider wire, 15 pound. And then I have a few that have 20 pound on them too. For just those summer months, when we're seeing those really big redfish in the flats, hitting a top water plug, I beef it up a little bit.
On the fly side, same question, I guess, about gear. Like, what weight rod and floating line? Like, walk me through your decision, what your favorite setup is.
Yeah, so I throw a TFO, the professional, and it's an 8-weight, and it's paired with the Redington 8-weight reel, and I'm using floating summertime redfish line, and that's pretty much my setup. Our leaders, like 20 pound is good. You can even bring it down a little bit too. But summertime, when we're fishing flood tides, I have a little beefier leader on there just because that fly's coming through Spartina grass. Once you hook up with the fish, that line is going to drag across Spartina grass. So I use a little bit heavier leader when we're flood tide fishing.
Favorite all-purpose fly?
The Clouser minnow. It's always effective. It's always something I have in my box. Fish will eat it. It's been around for a while. It's got a great reputation, and it's one of the most known flies, the Clouser minnow.
Favorite all-purpose topwater?
The Rapala Skitterwalk, hands down.
Why?
I'll go. But there's a few colors that I like, depending on the watercolor. If I'm fishing darker water, that gold mullet is the deal. Clean water, I like to use that hot pink. And then my all-time favorite's the red and white. The red head with my body.
Aside from the color options, what else do you like about the Skitterwalk?
It's loud. It's got a great noise to it. It's not a dull noise. It's kind of sharp. It's the perfect. The more and more you throw topwater plugs, you can hear the difference of different brands. And that pitch to me is just something that just works. I don't know if it's just because I just caught so many fish on them or what it is, but that ticking noise is the deal for me.
All right. So in our pre-show notes, and I wasn't sure, I was thinking of working it into our talk and searching and stalking. Wasn't quite sure how to transition it in, but I'm intrigued by the topic. I know you got some thoughts on it. Talk to my audience now about the difference between sort of stalking, searching on single redfish versus schools of redfish. Like, how does that change your game?
It completely changes the game here. When you're fishing schools, a lot of them, will be in shallower water. Well, I find a lot of my schools in shallow water. And then you got to think about it. If you're pulling up or trolling up on a school of fish and there's 50 fish in that school, that's 100 little eyeballs looking at you. That's 100 different or 50 different fish there feeling that boat slide in there, hearing that one click on an oyster. There's a lot that plays into fishing a school and being able to catch fish out of a school. So what I like to do, if I have anywhere to hide the boat, if I can slide into a creek and I know that they're going to be in this bay and they're going to be on the outside of this bay and I can hide my boat in there without them feeling me or seeing me, then I like to do that. If there's a sandbar that I could park the boat on and kind of fish over the sandbar and catch those fish, then that's something that we'll do. And then single fish wise, you can get pretty close to a redfish as long as you're being quiet. As long as you have a steady speed going in there. If you're working a trolling motor, steady speed. If you're on a pulling platform, moving slow, you get that shot at that fish, and he's just going to be sitting there as long as you're quiet. Once you start to make a little bit of noise, those fish will spook up. And anybody that's been on a school of redfish will tell you any noise can set those fish off, and then they're up and moving. And you can let them sit for a while and see if they'll eat, or they may just be shut down for the rest of the day. It just depends on how much pressure is actually on them.
For people who are thinking they might want to go fishing with you, Ethan, you fishing for redfish 12 months a year?
I am. We're approaching my favorite time of fishing here in southeastern North Carolina. I love clean water. Our water gets tropical clean here, and there's just big schools of fish. And I love seeing my belly crawlers and my tailors in the grass during the summer months. But there's something about sitting on, 20 to 200 fish, and just knowing that they're right here. You can see them. They're doing laps around a sandbar, and, you just set your bait there until they come by and bounce it. And boom, there they are. And there's something about that really gets me going, man.
So right now, late fall through the winter, or right now into the winter?
All the way until like March, April, until that, our temperatures are dropping here. We have a big cold front coming in this next week. And then from there, I'm expecting to start to see some good schools. And then we'll fish all the way until March and April on those schools. And, they usually they'll huddle up together. They'll try to feed together. And that's some fun fishing, man. I tell all of my clients and all my guests that step on that boat, come back and see me in the winter. And I show them videos of previous years, and I still stay pretty steady through the winter because people like to see that fish and watch that fish eat and see big schools of them. That's cool stuff that we have here in southeastern North Carolina.
When you're charter fishing, you doing anything but red drum?
Yeah, I like to target speckled trout too. It's kind of been slow. It's been so mild, but I do turn my attention about like this time of the year, and I'll focus on catching big trout. I love catching big trout on topwater. That's another thing that I just love. And in that transition period, when you're coming out of your summer cycles with redfish into the fall to the winter, that's usually when I start to see those trout in that transition period. And when the drum fishing is kind of just all over the place, we're jumping from spot to spot to just find a few fish here and there. those big trout make it worth it, man. I really enjoy that.
Well, Ethan, I enjoyed talking to you, man. I enjoyed talking to you about redfish. Your passion for shallow water redfish is easy to pick up on immediately, and appreciate everything you shared with our audience, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, again, great
I can
time.
talk redfishing all day.
I believe you. I can't. So I'm going to say thank you, and we'll have you back on again for sure, but we appreciate your time today.
Cool. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Ethan. Billy.
What's up, man? What an episode. I love it.
That's right up your alley. So
Who's
you
there?
shouldn't have to struggle at all for Billy's best takeaway.
I mean, I think the whole theme of the podcast was...
No, you don't get to answer that way.
No, it is. It's stealth. That's what it is. Because I'm stuck at that.
You do?
Yeah, no. I'm the guy that's getting the drink out of the cooler every
closing
5
the hatch.
seconds. Closing the hatch, banging it around.
Oops.
Slapping my fly rod in the water.
Oops, was that bad?
Yeah. Hey, Captain, I don't understand why we're not catching fish. It doesn't matter what I do on the boat. Oh, man. Yeah, so anyway, that was probably... I mean, there's plenty of takeaways. I knew he was going to say clouds or minnow. I almost answered it for him. Number one saltwater fly. Love it.
I like
Love
the
it,
notion that 50 red drum mean what? 100 eyeballs.
100 eyeballs.
So think about that.
Yeah.
That will cross my mind next time.
Yeah, next time you see a school of 50 drum.
That's 50 drum. No, it's 100 eyeballs.
It's 100 eyeballs, and I hope to poke one.
Don't get a drink.
Nobody move.
Nobody move until I get a fish on that hook.
Oh, gosh. Anyway.
Man, thanks for a great show, Billy.
Yeah, man. Marine Warehouse Center, we really appreciate you guys once again for sponsoring the show. And if you guys have not, be sure to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe and be a part of that. And subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review.
Please do.
Let us know how we're doing.
Please do. We read the comments. We definitely pay attention.
Yeah. My favorite ones are like, Gary, thanks so much.
Gary,
It's
you're
amazing.
great.
Gary, you're great.
Gary and the other guy, good job.
Other guy. You guys are welcome. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, man, good show, Gary.
You too, Billy. Thanks.
See you, man.
Fisherman.